What's up, everybody? I'm finally back with the long-awaited video of an in-depth look at Profit Trailer and PT Feeder and kind of the fan favorites. I'm going to go over coin-specific overrides. I'm going to go over, pump and dumps, how to protect yourself from that sort of deal, how to, the upside, downside volatility. I'm going to talk about, some of the functionality that was put into PT version 2. And I've been getting a lot of comments about how, Profit Trailer version 2 kind of makes PT Feeder irrelevant, which I completely disagree with, to be honest. I think Profit Trailer version 2 did a great job of integrating a few settings that kind of from a more macro view handle certain percentages for the overall market really well. I think that's really important that they added those in, but the add-on of PT Feeder really helps you hone in and guide your Profit Trailer bot to another level. I'm fully into Profit Trailer Feeder. I use this thing exclusively. I don't use PT on its own. I use only PT Feeder. And it seems kind of weird to me because a lot of people just kind of stopped talking about Feeder and they stopped kind of talking about the settings, and maybe it's just too difficult for people to like fully grasp. Maybe that's it. But this video should give you a better idea and a better starting point on where to go, because I think I've honed in some of these settings pretty well. I've been using them for the past week and a half or so, and I'm not sitting in these negative 20, 25% bags that a lot of people might be sitting on over the past couple days of this sea of red that we're seeing. So, obviously I'm going to dig a little bit into Bitcoin and like a little bit of TA just to give us some perspective on how it affects our trading bot. Before I do that, I want to say a big thanks to all of my loyal subscribers who've been commenting and being like, yo, where's the crypto boss? Is he gone forever? And no, I'm not. I'm back. I was handling some business offline, super busy, but that is all done and taken care of. So I'm back. I'm going to be focusing a lot on making really good quality content to help the community, both in Profit Trailer and just trading and crypto in general. So I'm excited about that. I got some cool stuff that I'll be launching, with regards to some like training material with Profit Trailer and PT Feeder, and then maybe some, TA stuff. But anyway, we'll get into Bitcoin. So obviously, sea of red. From a trading perspective, from a Profit Trailer perspective, this may be not so good if you're not using Feeder or your settings aren't dialed in correctly. This can be a little bit scary. Maybe you're sitting in a bunch of bags. But from a swing trading perspective, this is really nice. If you're looking at the market and you're not too worried about a prolonged bear market, this can be something that you're very excited about. This is a great buying opportunity as long as you do your due diligence while looking into the charts. So that's what we're going to do. We're sitting at the 5-minute candle, which is basically where Profit Trailer and PT Feeder are executing their buying strategies. Some people use 15-minute candles, some people use 5. It's all personal preference, just depends on how aggressive or kind of conservative you want to be. It really just depends. So what a good trader will do is they'll look at the micro time frames and work their way out from maybe the 5-minute to the 15-minute, then they'll move to the 1 hour. And as you can see, the charts are constantly changing. But what they'll do is they'll look for similarities in the 1 hour chart to the 4 hour chart, for example. And they'll do this on many different time frames. And they'll look for just similarities and how they can sort of get a bigger picture of what's going on in the market. And we as traders, swing traders, have the luxury of doing this. Now, Profit Trailer doesn't necessarily have that luxury. It's not necessarily, some super smart AI bot, right? It's looking at signals that you tell it to look at. It's looking at EMA, for example, if you're using EMA gain, or it could be looking at MACD. But this will give us a better idea of how Profit Trailer is running. So we can look at this 1-day chart. And this is just good overall to be aware of, and sort of for the scenario that I could see playing out in the near term. We obviously had our recent low at like 6,400, somewhere in there, and we had a nice 5-wave up. So we had this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't draw it out because it's not super necessary, but what we're seeing here is on the daily chart, we had 3 really big negatives in a row. And so we had this bearish divergence in the MACD recently. And what that sort of told me was that, this isn't necessarily a good buying opportunity, and you should kind of start to be careful, especially if you're in profit trailer or PT feeder. You don't really know where this is going to stop. Now, luckily, we definitely stopped definitively yesterday on the 0.236 line, which was really good. We closed well above the 0.236, and now we're just a bit above where we closed yesterday. So that's good. And we can kind of start to draw some support lines. We had previous resistance here. We had previous resistance here. So we can say that that's probably going to be a valid support line in the near term. So somewhere in between the 0.236 and the 0.382, we would look for some support if we do end up breaking back down. Another alternative is we could kind of consolidate in here and then get ready for a major impulsive move in one direction or another. And if that is the case, if that's how it plays out, then we really do need to hone in our profit trailer and PT feeder settings so we don't get hosed in that situation, because that would suck. So what I'll do is I'll kind of jump into my PT feeder settings, and you can get these off the GitHub. I'll upload them right after I finish filming this video. I'll upload those to the GitHub so it'll be ready when the video goes live. And also, I always forget to mention this, but please join the Discord. I'll leave the link in the description. I want to get that group popping. I only have like 30 people in there, and we have almost 4,000 subscribers, so we should definitely start amping up that Discord and talking about PT feeder, just different profit trailer settings. We can go over the bag strategy that I've been talking about in previous videos. I'm more than willing to help with that. Patrick is a great resource for that as well. He puts in a ton of time and energy into that strategy, so he's a great resource as well. So, and he's a great guy. He's always willing to help out. So I definitely recommend hitting up him too with regards to that channel. But let's get right into this. So these are my updated app settings folders. Okay. So not a lot changed up top, and that's really not that important. None of this stuff is all too important. These are all kind of your base settings. A lot of this is all like your indicator stuff. This is all stuff that can be interchangeable with yourself. So don't focus too much on this. These are the settings that I'm using right now, and you feel free to change them if you want. The defaults. This also is not super imperative. One thing I want to note on these buy strategies is the more buying strategies you have, the more difficult it's going to be for you to get a buy. So if you're looking for profit trailer to just be cranking out buys, 5, 6, 7 buys an hour, you're probably not going to see that if you're using more than one buying strategy. So I'm just keeping that crystal clear. The reason I like to use 2 for a buying strategy is because it gives you a little more insurance that you're getting into a better trade. If you're buying, say the EMA gain is at negative 0.8, but your RSI is at 90, the RSI is a really good indication of being overbought or oversold. And so if you're buying at an extremely overbought territory, you have a higher chance than not to get stuck in a really nasty trade, even though the EMA gain buying value was triggered. So that's something to keep in mind. This is something that I'm using. I'm using 2 of them. My DC enabled is at -3. A lot of this stuff, very basic. Sell strategies. I'm using the RSI as well, just because if you're going to sell a coin and it's already way oversold, you might have an opportunity of getting a little more juice out of that trade, right? So in my opinion, if the RSI is around 43, I'm okay with it for the sell strategy. So that's good for me. I'd like it to be above, this could even be lowered to 40. I wouldn't be upset. And a gain value of 1. So let's see, getting down into the DCA stuff. I've talked about this in the past, and I've been using the sort of dilution strategy, the bag killing strategy that I've been over in other videos. So the DCA stuff, I might start playing around with another stop loss on the DCA for maybe like a 4th DCA value. I'll keep you guys posted if I end up doing that, but you can kind of get a decent idea. I'm using all 100s just because I'm a little fortunate. I have some extra funds to be playing with. If you're running low on funds or your Bitcoin is tied up in a ton of bags, I'd recommend, lowering some of these DCA buy percentages, and you can still lower your average cost. It's just not going to be as much. So, and then on the inverse of that, you can increase this to, 200% and buy more on your second DCA and get your average cost down that way as well. And so I might play around with that too. So let's see here. This is where it gets juicy, and this is where it gets really important. And before I dive really deep into this, I'll go over some of the profit trailer version 2 stuff that kind of changed, where people are saying, oh, maybe it's kind of all baked in. I don't really need PT feeder. So if we look at this, default buy min change percentage is 0. This basically is saying only purchase a coin if the 24-hour percentage change is above the set value. So this is actually a really cool setting. Basically it just says, if you set this to negative 2%, it's only going to buy a coin if the 24-hour change is above that negative 2%. So you can kind of get a little bit of a better idea of what's happening in any given moment on any given coin. So that's kind of cool. Default buy max change percentage. So only purchase a coin if the 24-hour percentage change is below the set value. So this is just kind of the inverse of what we just saw. So if you have it set to -1, only buy a coin if the 24-hour change is below -1%. So this is kind of you trying to time the bottom. And, that's a good thing. This is just kind of one of the triggers that you can use in Profit Trailer. Obviously your buying strategies will be thrown into play with these settings. But this kind of gives you a little more functionality with sort of coin specific or market condition sort of settings that Profit Trailer didn't have in the past. But to me, this doesn't really mean that Profit Trailer feeder is out of the question, and we'll get into why in a minute. So you have your pair min listed days is equal to 0. This is just saying do not purchase a coin if the coin used market has not been listed on the exchange for more than the set number of days. You can set this to 0 to disable it. So this is cool. If a coin just gets put on an exchange, sometimes it'll pump really hard and then dump really hard. So this is kind of another way that you can get around that. And these are the main strategies that I would be using if you don't have feeder. It just kind of gives you a little bit of an edge. Now, if we go to the feeder wiki here, there are some really cool pair groupings that we can do, and we can really hone in our bot on how we can get into some better trades. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of get into my market conditions stuff here. So basically what I'm doing here is we have our market conditions groupings, and we can go to the wiki. I guess it's going to have me scroll up. So here we are, section. In the below example, there are 3 market conditions: bear, boring, and bull. The market conditions groupings can have multiple triggers and also needs a name property. Multiple triggers are treated as an OR, which means if any of the triggers are true, then the market condition is applied. So the triggers that can be used in the market conditions are described as below. Each section of the grouping is checked sequentially, and only the first one that is true will be applied. So this is really important, and I'll give you an explanation. So Profit Trailer Feeders Wiki does a really good job of kind of explaining why you would use some of their triggers and some of their systems, right? So all of the below triggers are used based on the assumption that you make on the correlation between certain things that are happening in the market and how you want that to affect your bot. What do you think will happen to your bot if BTC rises a lot in value or dips a lot in value? Or if the top pairs are doing really well, what impact does this have? This is how these can be used to determine what settings you want to use. And so this is where PT Feeder really gives you the full functionality of this trading bot, and that's why I love it. So we can get into it. So I'm using the max top coin average change for my triggers, I guess, for my market condition trigger. So I'll kind of explain what that means. All right, so basically the max top coin average change is set to me, in my case, is set at -4. And this is basically saying that if the maximum change of the top coins from your configured exchange is less than this max, for my example is -4, then we are in this market condition and we'll use the below offset. So the number of coins whose percentage price is measured is configured in the top currencies to check section up at the top. So if we scroll up to the top of this file, you'll see here that it's checking 75 of the top currencies. So that's basically, we're telling Profit Trailer Feeder to go into this folder, the bear folder, just like how we used to use it, but now there's no folders. And we're telling it to override all of our above settings. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to overwrite your pairs.properties file, your indicators file, and your DCA file in Profit Trailer with all of these settings. So that's going to be like, that's why Profit Trailer Feeder is really powerful, is because you can literally tell it, give it new buying strategies for certain market conditions. Whereas with Profit Trailer, you could do some of that. You can kind of tell it, hey, this is a market condition, do this, but your buying strategies remain constant. Whereas in PT Feeder, you can tell it some of the similar stuff, right? Like this only purchase a coin if the 24-hour percentage change is above the set value. Well, yeah, you can do that in Feeder, but you can't in Profit Trailer with the stock Profit Trailer. You can't overwrite your buying strategies and kind of set and forget it. And that's what's really cool about PT Feeder, is you're more able to set and forget. And especially if you have good buying strategies, good settings, you'll really get yourself into better buys using PT Feeder. So that's kind of why I use that. So we can go over into the overrides. Basically, for those of you interested in my settings, this is what I'm using. So when we're in a bear market, I actually ended up using 3 buying strategies. So I overwrit the EMA gain from the top for my A buy strategy. It's now using low BB. My A buy value is -10 to -35. The weight is 55. My BB buy strategy is loss. And basically this weight, you can get a better idea of what this does in the wiki. I don't really want to get into it too deep, but it just has to do with if you have a different section of Profit Trailer Feeder that you have some other like settings going on, what do you want to take precedence? And basically the one with the highest weight will take precedence. So basically I'm kind of using this bearish folder as my kind of go-to folder. So if that makes sense, if you don't understand the weight, just literally go into Profit Trailer Feeder's wiki and Control F and search for weight. And there's a very good explanation. Max profit is 1.1 in a bear market. I'm cool with just taking profit. DCA enabled. I added an extra DCA label, enabled level for a bear market, just because, you know, for the time being right now, I don't see us going into a prolonged bear market. So if we do get into this market condition, I don't necessarily think it's going to last very long. And so I'm okay with, you know, adding another DCA level and then trying to get out of that once we sort of go into a more bullish mode. So my boring market, I left the same as my defaults up top. So everything that you see up here is being called on in my boring market. If you don't use any overrides or offsets down here, then it will use the settings from up top in this section right above the market condition grouping. So if that makes sense. And then we have our bull market. We have our overrides here. I use the MA gain. I lowered the buy value. I lowered or increased the RSI. And basically I did this just because if we're in a bull market, I'm okay with, you know, sacrificing, getting into really, really awesome trades, because if we're in a pretty hefty bull market, then I'm just sort of playing the market and I want to be able to kind of ride that swing. So that's what I'm doing there. And then this is where it kind of gets juicy. This is where a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this video, I think, is not necessarily the new coins grouping. We went over this briefly, but this is just another pair grouping. So if you go into the PT Feeder wiki and you click on section pair groupings, this is where you're going to find all of this information. And I guess before I jump into this, I'll go back up here to this market conditions grouping. So the market conditions grouping, you don't have to use the max top coin average. You can use any of these triggers, and you can use all of them at once if you'd like to, but they're treated as an OR, just like it says up in here. So If any of these triggers are true, then the market condition is applied. So keep that in mind. But basically, you can use the max top coin long-term average change. And basically, it's the same as the above, but it uses the minutes for longer-term trend from the default section to calculate that average. You can use a min base coin price change. So this is saying that if the minimum change of your base coin, example, Ethereum or Bitcoin, against the US dollar tether is more than 2%, then we are in this market condition and we will use these offsets. So for those of you wondering, hey, how do I create a good solid set of settings for PT feeder when Bitcoin is launching in value or Bitcoin is really just plummeting? So this is the one that you want to use. You want to use the max base coin price change right here. And where you would put that is you would just put that right either if you want to use them both at the same time, you're more than welcome to do that. And I might even play around with that. So what we could do is, just for example's sake, I'll just put that in max base coin price change. And then we'll put our colon. And then we'll say negative 5%. And because that is just for one coin versus the max top coin average is basically telling PT feeder, you know, look at all of the top 75 coins and then create an average. This is just looking at Bitcoin or your base pair if you're using Ethereum. So this is really powerful. Now this folder will get put into play when Bitcoin drops by 5%. And so if we see that this is using the minutes to measure trend from the default section of the app settings folder. So if we go up to the minutes to measure trend, we can kind of gauge minutes to measure trend. So we're using a 60-minute candle. So if we scroll down, that would probably justify a pretty bearish scenario. Bitcoin falling by 5% in 60 minutes. So you can use this. I will keep this in when I launch this onto my GitHub, and you can use this if you like, or you can take it out by all means, whatever you want. And then the same thing goes here. I'm just going to use the max top coin average change in this situation. And then the same idea for the bull market. Again, we've already been over that. So this new coin grouping, we talked about this briefly. Coin age. This is measured in days. And that's what I put here. You can measure it in microseconds, I think, or milliseconds maybe, if you really want to. But I'm going to use 3 days. If a coin is on the market for 3 days, just don't trade it. Sell only mode enabled. I don't want any part of a pump and dump, and it's probably going to happen within, a week. So you could increase this. I'll put 5. I'll put 5 for now. Okay, this is where it gets really good. So average candle size grouping. Let's go down to the pair groupings. And I'll give you guys an idea of what this average price candle size is. And I don't want to botch it because I don't memorize these things. It's somewhere in here. I might have, there it is. Okay. So average candle size grouping. What we're working with here is, and these are all new settings that I didn't have in my previous version. So this is all really important. These are really cool stuff that I'm working with here that have really helped me. Basically, the average candle size is the addition of the upside and downside volatility. So if this is less than 0.1%, then these offsets apply. And the trigger for this sort of grouping scenario is max percentage size of price. And I'm using 0.02, and I'll kind of explain why in a second. We're going to kind of come back to this one since it piggybacks off of the downside and the upside volatility. And this is where it gets really fun. So I'm excited to show you guys this. So I guess, what did I put first? Downside volatility. So we'll do downside volatility first. The downside volatility is measured as the average change as a percentage between the open and the low of the 5-minute candles over a period defined in the minutes to measure trend. If this is less than 0.1%, then these offsets apply. And then it says that there is a community trading view script that allows you to understand what this is doing. And I'm going to dig into that in a second. But first, we're going to read why this is a good idea. A large downside volatility means that for each candle, the price is dropping a lot. And this might be a good buying opportunity, or another way of looking at this is this coin may be on a downtrend and more likely to bag up. So I hope you guys are following what that all means. But basically, I have this TradingView script set up on Cardano. And what you're looking at here is obviously my EMAs, which is my buying value and my buying strategy. And then you're looking at this TradingView script that somebody made. And the downside volatility is this red line down here. And the upside volatility is the green line. And basically what it's doing is it's kind of just taking the average of the candles, and it's giving you a better indication of how many green candles there are versus how many red candles there are. And basically that gives you a good idea, or somewhat of a good idea, on how you can kind of play the market swings. So I'm using this, and obviously this is not my only buying strategy or my only buying trigger. This is just something in addition to everything up top that can kind of help me if we're getting into a really negative bag situation. So the downside volatility is, I have a bunch of stuff set up here from yesterday that I was looking at, and this is where we were sitting yesterday. So this downside volatility was extremely high up in this situation. As you can see, we had a pretty nice drop off from way up in here. So we had about a 7% drop in coin value. And as you can see, that caused the downside volatility to steadily increase. And it topped out at about 0.63, as you can see on the right-hand side. And so this is really a cool situation that you can use, because when this downside volatility gets above a certain point, what you can do is you can say, okay, well, maybe it's time that it kind of reverses, and maybe it's a good buying opportunity. Maybe it'll help you time the bottom. But if the downside volatility is too low, like maybe in this situation, then okay, well, maybe it's a bad time to get into a buy, because there's hardly any downside volatility. Can this uptrend continue forever? And so that is the way I'm kind of using this downside volatility grouping. And I'm just using offsets. I'm not using overrides, but basically if the downside volatility is above 0.37, which is right around this mark that I drew yesterday, this red trend line, if it's above that, then I want to have my buy value of a 50% offset. So I'm okay with hopping in to a bigger bag at that situation, because I'm of the opinion that if it's above this level, which the reason I drew that trend line was because it touched a ton of times in the past, right at this 0.37, 0.36 line. And every time it touched, it just briefly went up, and then it came skyrocketing back down. And you can see that is the case over even the course of the day. So I'm okay with increasing my buy values, so I get, a better buy, or I more ensure a buy. And so then my upside volatility grouping is the same idea, but it's sort of in reverse. So if the upside volatility is above the 0.28 line, because I drew that line, which is this green one yesterday, if it's above that line, then I have a feeling that maybe it's going to kind of skyrocket down, and thus being a bad buying opportunity, like it was right here. It was above that 0.28 line up in here, and then it just kind of dipped way down, and we saw a big price action dip. And so this is a really good way of helping me get an idea, and this is on a coin by coin basis that it's going to calculate this for. And I'm going to get a really, really good idea of good buying opportunities, right? So this is super helpful, and I really haven't bagged up hardly at all over the past 4 or 5 days. So that is why I think PT Feeder is an extremely valuable tool and can really give you an edge in the coming weeks, right? With all of this volatility. So with that said, guys, please subscribe to the channel, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment if you liked it, and join that Discord. All right, guys, I'm out of here.